Hello and good morning, good afternoon, welcome. I see that we are all getting connected. There are many participants at this time. It's noon in Spain, and I hope you can all hear me well. Thanks especially for devoting this time today to get together, to share and to know an innovative novelty of learning. We are going to know about flow. We'll soon see what it's about. It's going to be explained to us by the missionaries of Nazareth. It's a community devoted to education, but education understood as a great opportunity for transformation, where to transform the world. And in order to achieve that transformation, time ago, education left behind this teaching paradigm of it being unidirectional, where the teacher teaches and the student learns. We're speaking about new educational models. We speak of learning, and flow is deep learning, and that includes shared experience, the feeling of belonging to a community where each member contributes with knowledge, skills, diverse intelligences, and contributes and shares. There's a translation of that knowledge and skills. And like in communication, and allow me to make this similarity because I devote myself to communication. Information is what we say, but is not the only thing necessary if you want to understand the message. The context is important. Communication is bidirectional. Our message, non-verbal language, what we do with our voice, with our gestures, does communicate. And so in learning, the environment matters. And the environment is able to increase the ability to learn up to 25%. 25% of the school performance gets better. So the environment matters. And to speak about flow, we have Nuria Miró from Australia, the author of the book Flow, Emerging Learning. She's currently collaborated with Catholic Education in the in Northern Australia. She's a director of global education at world level, and we have attendance from 27 different countries. So we have simultaneous translation via Zoom. Nuria, welcome. Thanks, Cristina. Welcome. I'll talk to you in a moment, but let me continue introducing who is going to be together with us throughout these minutes. And let me welcome the Superior General of Missionaries of Nazareth, Montserrat del Pozo. She was the principal of the College of Montserrat, really referencing pedagogical innovation. Welcome, Montserrat. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this event. Pleasure for us all. We'll also enjoy a conference from the United States. Prakash Nair, a visionary architect. Welcome. I don't know whether you can hear me, Prakash Nair. I hope you can hear us soon. Let's continue, but surely you can hear us, and we'll give you the floor. Let's start with the book author, Nuria, because the first thing we have to ask you is, why this book? Well, first of all, this book, because it has to do with telling a good experience, a very positive experience we had, and it's part of that vocation of service, I'll say, that Colegio Montserrat has always had, to communicate, to share, and it's part of that evolution of innovative processes, which have been told in other books as well. But on top of that, I'd say that the purpose of writing Flow has to do as well with a kind of reflection process, because even though it is important to have ideas and put them into practice, and that's what helps us progress, I'd say that's only when we reflect upon those ideas and when we're able to implement actions from that reflection, it is when that progress becomes sustainable in time. And therefore, I believe that this book, Flow, has to do with documentation, with what we call documentation, pedagogical documentation, and the great power that documentation has in order to continue learning. I'd say that this book, I haven't written it myself alone. It's been the result of collaboration with many people, with Betsy Urana, the principal of children education of the College of Montserrat, where that experience has taken place. And I would also like to say that even though it has been implemented in a children's school, whatever we say here, it's applicable to all stages in education. And it's not just reflections between Beth and I, but also the parents' reflections are included in this book, but also the whole reflection process by the whole team of teachers, men and women of children's education of Collegi Montserrat, and the same reflection that the board team and the words and experiences of children, their observations, have been included as well. So it's a process of collective building, collective construction. We must say that flow is a space without walls, where knowledge is shared, hope is shared. Nuria, how does flow work exactly? Flow is a space, a physical space, but I'd say that it's also a philosophy, a way of thinking education, a way of understanding what educating means. As a physical space, it's about 500 square meters, and it originates from some old classrooms, 2 classrooms for 3-year-olds, 2 for 4-year-olds, and 2 for 5-year-olds. So 6 classrooms with a long corridor connecting them, and so it comes from that space. And now it's been organized through 12 other learning spaces, which are not boxes, have nothing to do with the old classrooms, but are really distributed in a well-organized way in that flow space. What I'd like to say is that that space, but it invites us and it helps. That's why we've put this title of Emerging Learning. It invites us to see emerging those skills, the abilities that children have in a very intuitive way, sensorial way, the atmosphere, the materials, the environment kind of captures you and kind of provokes you. What do I mean? When the child goes inside a curiosity lab, for example, that space has the power to awaken those scientific seeds. What can I do as a scientist? It kind of awaken a disposition in me. And when I go up to the treetop in order to read, there's a whole environment generating my disposition to silence, for solitude, which are necessary to be able to read. When, for example, I remove my shoes and I go through the threshold, a door inside a space, I can listen to God, what God wants to tell me. And this circular environment perhaps is talking to me of how God is embracing me and the love of God. And when, for example, when you move inside the common space just at the entry and you see on the floor an emotional thermometer, that generates a disposition of how am I today? Perhaps I have to regulate my emotions for this moment. So that whole environment is helping me create those dispositions. And so this flow space is really connected with multiple intelligences. And I'd say that it democratizes all those learnings. That is, in that space, because not in all places I do the same, and that's very important that each place has its own learnings. So somehow we democratize those learnings. I'm saying that everything is important because those learnings are speaking to me about the child, the complete person a child is, and learning music is as important, and being able to learn mathematics, for example, and they are really interconnected. We are speaking of a space where everything which is being offered and in itself is important, really important. And there are specific places for each of those learnings, dispositions, talents we have. But I'd say there are two which are cross-sectional to the whole space and have to do with the relationship with oneself, the ability to be able to self-direct our learning, to take decisions, to think, and the relationship with other people and other students, and which give me this ability as well. So those interpersonal skills are the ones which are the vehicle so that in our lives, we can take good decisions and be successful in the good sense of the words.
Perdona, no, que has hablado de cosas muy
Well,
importantes
Nuria, you've
porque yo
mentioned
creo
really
que hace
important
muchos años, ¿no? Que vimos la
things.
importancia de una
Many
educación
years ago, we saw how
personalizada, donde
important it
cada
is to
alumno
have
desarrolle sus propias
personalized, customized
capacidades,
learning where each
una
student
educación
develops
que
his or own
permita
skills,
desarrollar las inteligencias
education
múltiples.
which
Nos has
allows for
hablado
the
también de
development of
ello, de
multiple
las
intelligences.
inteligencias
You've talked
múltiples.
to us about
Yo entiendo que es
them,
algo
multiple intelligences.
complicado
I
de
think that's
conseguir, ¿no? De conseguir
a bit
esos
complicated to
objetivos.
achieve.
Entonces,
I mean, those goals are
según
complicated to
vuestra
achieve, aren't they?
experiencia, la
And in your
necesidad que existía de
experience,
crear este espacio
then
para
there was the
conseguir todo eso,
need
¿no? ¿Qué
to create this
necesidad
space to achieve all of
habíais
that.
visto que
Which
faltaba para
need
poder
had you
crear este
seen
espacio?
which was missing to be able to create that space? Well, in reality, the space is the result of making headway, making progress in a process of transformation, and reach the top. We had already engaged in this kind of transformation process, where students are at the center, and students learn in a learning network. It's really global learning, kind of looking at the world in an attitude of service. And so we wanted to give a meaning to the learning. And so for speaking of space, we needed that transformation and in order to harmonize it with all those other transformations. And our teachers are really well prepared, really well trained in this kind of interventions. We have a great capital, human capital, social capital, really there, so that in that environment things could flow. All those transformations could have a vehicle for to kind of be in-depth transformations. And so what's happened to us is like when you want to go to the summit of a mountain, climb up to the summit, and when you're there and you make the effort, you've been motivated. When you are there at the top, at the summit, you see another summit, and that is what's happening to us with flow. We've reached a summit, and reaching that summit is opening up other possibilities for us, another world. You were talking about customization or personalization, multiple intelligences. Oftentimes, we use those words in when we speak of education. It's like a kind of a hope, an ideal, a chimera, and we've realized that we've taken many steps towards more customized learning and teaching. But now with Flow, we understand those things through new parameters. New challenges have been
Hemos estado
generated as well.
nuevos retos. Sí, que
new
estamos hablando de
challenges,
esos nuevos retos
and
de toda
so
la comunidad educativa,
there are new
que
challenges for the whole
incluye a profesorado, por
educational
supuesto,
community,
a alumnos,
including
pero entiendo que
teachers,
también
students, but I
los padres
understand
y
also
madres tienen que
parents
participar
have to
de
be
ello.
involved.
Permítame que le pregunte a
Let
Montserrat
me
del Pozo, como
ask
referente en innovación
Montserrat
pedagógica,
del Pozo
cómo
as
se
a reference
traslada toda
in
esta experiencia
pedagogical innovation. How
novedosa,
do you
algo
transfer
que no se
that
había oído hablar, por lo menos en España, a
new
los
experience,
padres y a las
something we
madres, cómo se
hadn't
les,
heard talk about, at least in
de
Spain?
alguna
How do
manera,
you
se les
pass
integra,
on
¿no?, en
that
toda
to
esta
parents and
transformación
involve them in
pedagógica.
this whole transformation, pedagogical transformation? Well, there are two types of concepts of families in at schools. There are schools saying that families are an essential part in the growth of a child, and families have the most important role. And there are schools which say no, experts are the ones helping families to develop in this respect. So for us in our school, a family is essential. Our school, knowing that family really helps and it's essential, we can tell them, please help us, let's do this together, let's see how we do it. Conversely, at other schools, they say, parents, please stay at the door, do not go. It's forbidden for you to go in, because what's most important is how I'm going to make your child grow. And so I think the families are the great teachers of their children. And Saint-Exupéry said, when you want to convince something to build a kind of ship, don't tell him what's the most important wood or the best technique for constructing, for building. What you should do is to make them enthusiastic about the ship. I think families, children themselves need to discover the possibilities from what one is, which possibilities education offers me, and school for me to grow, and that means integrating. I'd say that this flow space makes some energies awaken within children. Oftentimes, not even children, families know, but I think flow is like a gym of creativity, that creativity which goes beyond oneself,
¿Y qué hace?
that's why it's important that families to be involved as experts. For me, that has been really relevant, and that we all were together with the families, co-creating that space for several years with architects, with professionals. But I think families have a really important
Me parece
role.
muy interesante
I think
incorporar
that's
a
really
las familias
interesting
desde el principio, ¿no? Es
to
realmente
involve the
interesante.
families from the
Y
very
un modelo,
beginning,
sobre todo para
and
exportar. Yo no sé qué hace
a model
falta para
to
que algo así se
export as
extienda por
well.
todos los centros educativos
What do
y
we
se
need
convierta en
so
el
that this
paradigma
kind of
transformador
model
y
becomes
en
a
el habitual, además.
transformative paradigm and the usual paradigm everywhere? I think that the only thing missing is believing in the child, putting the child student at the center to answer to his her needs. The flow is not a franchise. In Timor Leste, in Cameroon, in Argentina, we are going to kind of escalate that space, but we're not doing precisely that. What we're doing is generating a process where the countries themselves, the context, the cultures, the way of doing things may generate a space where children, students become the center, where they may develop at most
Muy
their
interesante. Me ha
possibilities.
quedado
That's really
claro
interesting.
también que en esto de sentir
It
una
was clear to me
pertenencia a una
that
comunidad y de
feeling
que
this
cada uno
belonging to a community
desarrolle
and
sus
that each
capacidades y las
one
comparta
has
con
to
otro,
develop his
se han mezclado
abilities, skills,
etapas
and share with
educativas, se
the
han
rest.
mezclado edades en los niños, pero
Educational stages have
no sé
been
cómo habéis podido hacer todo
blended
esto durante
together,
la
ages of
pandemia, ¿no?
children blended
Donde
together.
se han creado tantos
How have
grupos
you been able
burbujas
to
y ha
do this
habido
during
tanto
the
debate
pandemics
en
where
las
there have been so
escuelas.
many bubble groups and so much discussion at schools? Well, this pandemics has been really a matter of concern for many schools, and I would like to congratulate all teachers of all stages because of the huge effort they've made to give the best out of themselves, to do their best. Perhaps we thought we weren't prepared, but we were prepared, and otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done. But I think the space is a large space which allows you to have those bubble groups during the pandemics. Well, the children in bubble groups have been able to do the same activities as when they were at school, but we haven't had that kind of relationship amongst the different ages. But that space is also very
Mhm.
valid today in the
Nuria,
pandemics as well.
¿por qué el nombre de flow?
Nuria, why this name, Flow? Well, this name, Flow, which is the name we gave to this space, it came up when we were talking amongst all the teachers, teachers for 1-year-old children and up to teachers of 18-year-old boys and girls. And in that space, we have like a river. It's like a simulation of a river which kind of flows through the whole space. And that's where children walk and do all sorts of things. And with the idea of that river, the teachers of 1-year, 2-year-old students proposed that name flow, and we connected with the reason behind that psychologist of flowing. And it fits very well because that theory speaks of harmonization between the emotional and cognitive. And I think that happens in this space. This space generates a great sensorial space, but at the same time does invite to engage in different types of learning. I'd say that we do not leave the children to be there and just do things alone and thus learn. No, we believe in a method. We believe we need a method, a language, a scaffolding, so to speak, in order to kind of make that learning be able to be built and kind of be founded in depth. And so flow has to do with learning, with moving inside a situation which is challenging enough so that I feel motivated to continue and go on and on learning because I have some skills with me. And so that's why flow is a space for listening, for observation. You get help there. And um, of course, many things are communicated to students, to children with many languages. So for me, the idea of being able to flow is important, but let's give the child, the student, possibilities with methods. There's a method for learning to write and read, to learn violin, to discover and understand and the religious language as well. And methods help, and there's a
Claro, para quienes
scientific
nos
method as
están
well.
escuchando, que puede
For
parecer
those of
un
us
lugar muy divertido, ¿no? Para los
listening to
niños, pero
us,
no podemos
they
olvidar
think that
también los
space
currículums,
may
¿no?
be
Que
really
nos marcan
entertaining for
desde los
children and
diferentes
amusing,
países, lo
but
que
we
hay que
shouldn't forget the
cumplir, los currículums
curricula,
educativos.
set
En
up in
España
different
hay
countries
cierta obsesión,
that
incluso
you have to
diría yo, por
comply
ese
with. In
currículum que
Spain,
además
there's
es muy amplio
some
y
obsession,
muy
I'd say, for
exigente, es
the
decir, que se
national
integran
curriculum, which is really
perfectamente en el
broad
flow, no hay
and
problema.
demanding. But that's integrated well in flow, isn't it? Or doesn't it? Yes, yeah, yes, it's integrated in project-based learning. Projects give us the opportunity not just to achieve the curriculum objectives, but go way beyond, because its nature is multidisciplinary, because we may think through the curriculum, and through the curriculum see the world in different ways. We may learn about different professions. We may place ourselves in the world and provide some service through that curriculum. So the project in itself does generate many other learnings, which kind of consider the child in his or her globality. It's not just knowing; it takes into account. It includes the child. So it's a way
Has hablado
where
antes
respect is shown for the
del
person.
río,
You
pero
mentioned a
también
river
hay
before,
bosque,
but
montaña,
there's
océano,
also
son las
forests,
metáforas del flow.
mountains,
No
oceans.
tenemos mucho
Those are
tiempo,
the
así que yo
metaphors of flow.
os
We don't
invito
have
a que veáis el
much
libro
more
y
time,
sepáis
so
qué es esto
let
de
me
las
invite you to
metáforas,
see
porque
this book
quería
and learn
preguntarle
about
también al señor
those
Prakash Nair que nos
metaphors. I would like to
acompaña,
ask
¿cuál es su
Mr.
relación con
Prakash
las
Nair,
misioneras
who
de
is with us,
Nazaret?
which is your relationship with the Nazareth missionaries?
Yeah, I was introduced to the missionaries of Nazareth when I was invited by College Montserrat to attend their Learning 360 conference a few years ago. That's when I had the good fortune of first meeting Sister Nuria, Sister Montserrat, and also Sister Monica and all their colleagues. I'll be talking a little bit more about all the answers that Sister Nuria gave, but I'll be actually showing pictures so we can talk through that. And then I had this project is so amazing, so I'd love to talk about it during my presentation. I also had the good fortune working with the Global Council, including Sister Montserrat, Sister Nuria, Sister M. Angeles, Sister Monica, on another important project, and this is in the country of Timor-Leste near Indonesia. This project is being done by the missionaries of Nazareth in collaboration with the congregation Esclavas de la Eucaristia, which has been designed and is now in the fundraising stage. I want to speak about that project as well, so I'm looking forward to it.
Claro, déjenme que les presente a Prakash Nair, que es un
I'm now
arquitecto
going to
visionario.
introduce
Él
Prakash
es
Nair.
presidente y
He's a
CEO de
visionary.
Education
He is
Design
the
International,
president
una
and
empresa
CEO
que él
of
mismo ayudará a
Education
ser uno de
Design
los principales
International.
agentes de cambio a nivel mundial en el diseño de escuelas. Hay oficinas ya en
Is a
52
world
países
leader
de 5
in school
continentes y ha
designer. He
recibido
has offices in 52
numerosos premios
countries in 6
internacionales,
continents,
incluido
and
el
he is the
Association for Running
recipient of many
Environment Smart
international
Cornell
awards,
Award,
including
que
the
es el más alto
A.
honor
McConnell
mundial de
Award, which
diseño
is the highest
escolar.
honor
Podemos
worldwide
decir que es un
for school
arquitecto
design.
educativo, el
He
más
is an
difundido además
educational
en el mundo,
architect,
autor de
very
3
well
libros,
known
2
in
de
the
ellos en
world. He's
colaboración con
written
la
3
Universidad de Harvard,
books, 2 of
así que
them
es un placer de
together
verdad
with
poder
Harvard
escucharle con
University, and it's a
esta
pleasure
ponencia
to having
magistral,
him
así que
here.
adelante, señor
So,
Nair.
you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to continue the conversation from where we left off with the questions with Sister Nuria and Sister Montserrat. So really, I want to continue this idea of flow, and we will start with that. So if you want to start at the top, we talk about Catholic values and what they are, and how College Montserrat and all of their related congregations are doing such an amazing job. And so really we start with the idea of caring for God's creation. This is the most important thing. And then call to family, community, and participation. We all have to contribute. And then every human being is important. And lastly, freedom. Yes, we talk about flow in these spaces. You think about the children having freedom, but they also have to have responsibility. It doesn't just have this one side of the equation. There are two sides to the equation. Freedom and responsibility, accountability go together. So the first part about caring for God's creation, a child is a beautiful thing. You know, it's perfect when a baby is born, and the job of the school is to make sure that we continue to nurture that perfection and not to think that we can improve on God's creation, right? And so they say that there's a garden in every childhood, an enchanted place where the colors are brighter, the air softer, the morning more fragrant. It's a metaphor. Basically what it is that childhood is a very special time, and we want to celebrate childhood. So this is something that we really need to think about when we are talking about schools, whether it's the physical design or the curriculum, whatever it is. So the important thing also to remember is that childhood is not just a preparation for adulthood. See, what happens in life is that we are always preparing for tomorrow, right? Even when you start in kindergarten, you say, oh, if you do well, you'll go to first grade. And then in first grade, you have to do well, then you go to second grade. And we continue this preparing for the future. Then you graduate from school, then you have to go to college, then you have a job, and then and on and on and on. And the problem is that the real life is today, is now. This is what flow is also about, is to be 100% in the now, and to celebrate that, and to be fully present in the moment. And so I think this is something that our children need to be aware of that it's not just about tomorrow and not just about preparing, but to be completely ready to live life fully in the present. So there are 3 or 4 basic fundamental human needs that all schools and all spaces have to fulfill. And those needs are, the first one is autonomy, which is our need to be independent, our need to want to feel like we are in control of our life. And in the case of architecture, we are in control of our environment. This is a very important basic human need. We all have this need. The second is competence. Competence means we all have to have a feeling that we can be good at what we do. Nobody wants to be bad at what they do, right? Everybody wants to be good at what they do. So competence is the need for all human beings to get good at whatever it is that they're trying to do. And the third is relatedness. We want to be connected with the other people, other people, other environments. We don't want to feel like we are all by ourselves in some corner. We want to connect with other human beings. So these are 3 very fundamental needs. And then there's a bigger need, which is we all want to aspire to a higher purpose. And especially the missionaries of Nazareth, they are very focused on the idea that it's not just about us, it's also about how we contribute to the world. What is my meaning? What is my purpose in life? Why am I here? So we want to make sure that children from a very early age are being fulfilled in these four ways. So if you think about this self-determination theory that I talked about, it is really the preconditions to be in flow. To be in flow means to have these amazing experiences in which time just stops, because we are completely engrossed in that activity. We are completely engaged in that activity. And the question is a school, whether it's the schedule, whether it's the curriculum, whether it's the space, are we designing our student experiences in such a way that they have the opportunity to get into the state of flow, which is an amazing place to be. So when we talk about designing spaces for flow, we're talking about 2 kinds of things. We have to design for wellness, so that people are feeling good, people are feeling healthy. Because if you're not physically well, then nothing else matters, right? And then the second is, are we also designing the space for this self-determination, which I said, this is competence and relatedness and autonomy. So that's an important thing. So this is what the design of spaces are all about. So here are some examples of what that might look like. If you were designing spaces for flow, here's an excellent example. If you think about the things about being autonomous, having competence and having relatedness, and also striving for a higher purpose, spaces like this will do this. This is actually a school we designed in San Antonio in Texas. Or a space like this. It doesn't have to always be a typical learning spaces. Any kind of space can have the same impact of creating a state of flow. It doesn't need to be just reading a book or doing an academic project. Or spaces like this where children can get away to sort of be on their own, but still be with others. So that kind of space is also a good place for flow. Or a space like this. This is actually an art room we created in Switzerland. And it actually looks at the mountains. So you want to connect with nature. This is a very big part of it. You want to know that you're part of something bigger, again, as I said. Or something very simple, just this is actually a school right next to where I live here in my neighborhood. And it's a beautiful, Florida has beautiful weather. So we can be outside. Why do you have to be inside all the time? Or this is a tree house we built for one of our schools. So of course it's harder to do that in an urban area, but this actually happens to be in an urban space, and we still managed to create a beautiful place for the children. So the thing we have to understand is that we're leaving our children with some significant problems. And we want to make sure that they are ready to address those problems. So let's look at some of the global problems our children are going to inherit. And I don't want to bring down the mood of this thing, but it's important to realize that this is what our children are going to inherit. So they are going to be worrying about unemployment. We're not talking about themselves. We're talking about trying to solve global problems of unemployment or lack of education. This is a big global problem that our children are going to be addressing. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about this when I discuss Timor-Leste, or what food and water shortage. This is a big issue that we have to deal with, or corruption, government corruption. This is another global challenge that many countries, including the United States, unfortunately, are facing. Religious conflict, again, a big part of the problems in the world. Poverty, income inequality, wars, of course. So, and climate change is the very big problem that our children are inheriting. They are inheriting these problems from us. So we have to make sure that they have the tools necessary to solve these problems. The education for tomorrow cannot look like the education from yesterday. In other words, we have to educate for our children's future and not for our past. This is the very important thing to remember. So one of the things that could be an advantage, but could also be an issue, is that there is this fourth industrial revolution, and this is moving very fast. And so this is going to change the rules of every industry, every business, every profession is going to be affected by this fourth industrial revolution. It moves much faster than the previous revolutions. It's moving, I mean, as I said, on a daily basis, many businesses and industries are completely shutting down because new ways of doing the same thing are being discovered. So this is the world in which our children live, in which movement is very fast, very dynamic, very quick. So if you think about being in a state of flow, there are three main skills that are enhanced. That's critical thinking, because when you're in a state of flow, you are able to solve the problem that you are encountering and analyze it. The second is you are able to solve very difficult, complicated problems when you are in a state of flow, much more easily than if you are distracted. And the third is that you are much more likely to be creative when you are in a state of flow. So these are the reasons why we have to ensure that our children are able to get to that place. The problem with most schools is that we have designed it specifically so that they cannot get to flow. We are constantly interrupting them. We're constantly telling them what to do. It's not conducive to them getting into their own state of flow, right? So the model that we have to go, and Sister Nuria talked about networks, we are moving from this very top-down model of education to a more democratic model where the children are teachers and they are learners. They're helping each other. They're doing cooperative learning. So this is a different model. And it's not just in school, even outside school, we're connecting with people, we're connecting with resources, we're connecting with information on an as needed basis. And now with the internet and the availability of courses, a lot of the information that was available only to, say, rich children is available to anybody. I'm actually doing a course right now with the Harvard University, and that course is free. And 230,000 people from all around the world have signed up for that course. So now a Harvard professor you can learn from and get a certificate, but you don't even have to pay anything for it. So it's a different model. It's a different world in which we are living, and schools have to recognize that. So we were talking earlier about how this, whether it's College Montserrat or wherever else, we're moving to this from a teacher-centered model of learning, which is something that has been around for more than 100 years, to and you can see teacher-centered learning is what happens in a typical classroom, right? So it's very difficult to think about giving up the classroom. But that's what I'm suggesting, that the classroom is left over from the first industrial revolution. It's about being in a factory. We have to give up that. And this is a very difficult thing for most people to accept. But we have been doing it for like 20 years. We have been designing schools without traditional classrooms. So again, no matter how good it might be, no matter how beautiful it is, a classroom is still a classroom. And this is the model that is more than 100 years old. So the problem with the classroom is that it does not allow for the things that we need to do today. The things that we need to do today are teachers need to collaborate. They have to work with each other, because then you can do interdisciplinary, you can support each other, and you can support the students better. There's a lot of research that shows that when teachers work together, student performance goes up. You want the teaching to be student-centered and student-directed. You want the curriculum to be interdisciplinary, and you want students to have a sense of community that is bigger than the classroom. So all of those things are not possible in a traditional design. So the minute you start just opening up the space between two classrooms, you are immediately improving teacher collaboration and making it a little bit more student-directed. But what we are looking for is a learning community model, which is what Collège Montserrat has adopted. And in the learning community, the teachers can work as a team, but you can see there is a variety of spaces for different kinds of activities. And this is what helps create the kind of flow in the learning, but also in the physical movement of children. So I think this video will show, because I'm sure many people will say, well, what happens to existing schools? Now, Collège Montserrat was an existing building. How do you change that? Because we have hundreds, if millions of students going to schools that are designed in the old, what we call cells and bells. Cell is a classroom, and then the bell goes off and they go to another cell, which is the same thing. So how do we change that model? So I'll just show you this little video that tells you how the typical classroom and corridor model can be changed to this model in which, as I said, flow and self-determination theory can happen. So first of all, you get rid of the traditional furniture, which is desks and chairs. You take down the walls, and then you create a variety of spaces. And that same area can now be used in a way that allows children to engage in multiple activities, which was not possible in the classroom. So you can have a big group gathering in the middle, if you like, but that big gathering can happen maybe when an expert is coming to talk to the children, and then it can go away, and then that space can become a collaborative space. Classrooms are gone, but you still have areas in which children can be brought together in groups. But those rooms can also be flexible, so they can connect with other rooms. So now you have, we call a learning suite, two learning studios combined, and then you have these garage doors that open up and allow the space outside to be used as well. So in this way, you're taking a traditional space and creating an environment in which flow can happen. So the reason for that is we want to go to this thing called the student-centered model, where the teacher's role is changed. The teacher's job is to be a guide, to provide wisdom, to give the advice, and and to be the adult mentor, but not to do the hard work. The hard work must be done by the children themselves. So here, even in 3 and 4-year-olds, they can manage themselves. The idea that they have to be continuously told what to do is not true. From a very early age, even a 2-year-old doesn't want to be told what to do. They want to do things on their own. So this is how we have to understand that whether it's early childhood, whether it's elementary school children, this like the school that we designed in Florida, or middle school children, this is a school in South Carolina. Again, you can see those garage doors. Students are able to manage themselves. Or a high school, as in this case. And you can see in these photos, you're not seeing the teacher, because the teacher's job is done when the assignment has been given and the big question has been given, and then it's the students that take over at that point. And the idea that they cannot manage themselves is not true, because if they are engaged in something and they are interested in it, then they are going to manage themselves. So there are 4 components of what we call student-centered learning, and all 4 have to be done in order for the spaces to work. The first is personalized learning, meaning that every child is different. We cannot assume that every child can be part of a group. This is not a factory. Every child is different. So every child needs personal attention. The second is competency. We talked about this before. We want to make sure that children are really understanding and learning. And that means that teaching does not equal learning. We first have to ensure that the children are truly understanding and that truly learned and mastered something before they go on to the next topic. Like if you're playing a video game, you don't go from level 1 to level 10. You go through level 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you have to work harder and harder to get through each phase. It's the same thing with learning. And anytime, anywhere simply means that nowadays, learning doesn't start and end with the school. We talked earlier about the parents, talked about the home, we talked about many other areas in which learning happens. And finally, student-owned learning means that every child should have some say in how they learn, where they learn, what they learn, and with who they learn. So these are the things that are very important if you want to do student-centered learning. So, so here is an example of what that might be. Personalized learning means teachers having the time to spend time with individual children. This would not be possible in a classroom, right? Or making sure that children get an opportunity to become competent. And I know that the violin is something that your children are learning in Collegio Montserrat as well. I was fortunate to see a lesson there. And anytime, anywhere learning. I mean, learning can happen anytime. It can be outside. It can be in some community center. It does not have to even be in school. And finally, student directed, meaning students have say in it. Like these spaces that we designed, you can see the students are on their own. There's no teacher here. So the idea that students can direct and manage their own learning is also very important. And if you think about space, we have to have 4 components, and Sister Nuria has mentioned this in the book. Be welcoming, be versatile, meaning agile. And the idea of agile means that the spaces have to allow you to do more than one thing. You don't want to always be moving furniture. You want children to be able to naturally go from one kind of environment to another kind of environment so that the spaces have a lot of variety. And it has to support multiple learning modalities, right? And meaning different kinds of learning. And the space has to send a positive message to the children that we care about you. So here's an example, say picture behind me of one of our schools. This is what we call a welcoming entry. We actually call this space the living room. And behind we call it a curiosity center where the children are free to explore all kinds of ideas. And here's a agile space. This is a space in which you can do many, many different activities without changing the furniture. This space can become many different things. And of course, when you talk about multiple modalities, we talk about Dr. Thornburg's, we call them metaphors. And again, Sister Nuria has mentioned this in the book. Talk about Campfire, which is what I'm doing now, is a storyteller who's talking to many, many people. The watering hole is when we are talking and learning from each other, cooperative learning. And cave is when we are by ourselves. And life is when you are learning by doing. So if you look at this, it's a good space for a campfire. But this space can also be anything else. This case can be used for, when it's not used in this manner, it can change. So that space is very agile. Or this is a watering hole space where students can work with each other, right? And this is a cave space. Now, people think that caves have to be designed, but children can get into their own head. They can get into a state of flow, even in a place that feels crowded. Because once you are engaged in your activity, then you are fully concentrating on that. Then you don't notice anything all around you, right? But you can also be consciously designing spaces for children to get away. So here at the bottom is a cave space, and at the top is a watering hole space. So we are consciously thinking of designing spaces that allow these different modalities to happen. Sometimes it's something as simple as this. The children can get into a cave space by just having a little structure within their learning environment. This is the American School of Bombay that we designed. And then life. You have to actually go out and do things in order to be a good learner. So here's an example of what that might be. Being outside, connecting with nature, or building something. This is another way of converting theory into knowledge, into practice, and learning to drive a car. I mean, you can sit in the classroom as much as you like, but you don't learn until you sit behind the wheel of the car. This is why life is a very important teacher. All the theory is fine, but the real world is a completely different thing. You cannot duplicate that until you experience it. So I want to just show these two projects that demonstrate these concepts, talk a little bit more about all the ideas that Sister Nuria was talking about. Now I'm actually going to show it to you in pictures, which, by the way, most of it is in the book. So I hope you will take time to study the book in detail. So, of course, interestingly, I took this picture, and when I was looking on internet, I wanted to find a nice picture of the Collège Montserrat. So I saw this picture and I said, oh, that's just a good picture. I have to get permission from the person who took this picture. And then I saw my name there. It's on Google. Somehow Google found this picture and put it up on the internet. So I realized it's actually the picture that I took, you know. And so I was introduced to the sisters at Learning 360 conference. And I want to say that this is an amazing, amazing group of people, kind, exceptionally cheerful, always positive. And among all the, you know, I think in the last 20 years, we have worked in 52 countries. I have to say this is among one of the most positive experiences that I've had working with this amazing group of sisters and this congregation, Montserrat. And of course, that's that 360 conference, which I was there. And actually, Daniel Pink, I don't know how many of you know him, he was at that conference. So I was privileged to have ability to meet him. He was one of the speakers as well at the conference. So this is how my introduction to Collège Montserrat. And at that time, we did a workshop because we were just dreaming. We didn't know, we didn't have any money. So we were thinking about what the future can be. So Sister Nuria and Sister Monica and Sister Montserrat and others asked me to do a workshop in which we brought all the teachers together and we had them dream about the future. This is where all these ideas started. So the teachers, interestingly enough, even at that point, without much training, they were thinking about these ideas of flow that we talk about. So they had some really great ideas, which is what ultimately resulted in this beautiful space. So as part of the process, we do something called discovery, which is, of course, I actually took this right out of the book. In a discovery process, we are trying to understand from the school, what is it that, what do you stand for? What are the things that you want to represent in this space? Because the space is just a physical representation of our education philosophy. So we wanted to understand that. And so we do something called discovery. And these are all the ideas that came about. And then the idea that there are these 20 different modalities of learning. I showed you 4 before with the Dr. David Thornburg's learning modalities, but there are really 20 of them. So when we design a space, we want to make sure that all 20 of them have an opportunity to go. So here, for example, I'm showing you 10 modalities. And you can see lecture is still there, but it's one of 20, not the predominant way of learning. And then, of course, there are another 10. So the idea is when you design a space, we want to make sure all these modalities of learning happen. So that's how the design of the Collège Montserrat came about. That space, which had a corridor down the middle, was changed, and you created these zones, and these metaphors of forest, mountain, and ocean were the metaphors that were used to create a feeling that this is different than a traditional school. This is not a place where you come, sit in a classroom, and wait for the teacher to tell you exactly what to do. Every 45 minutes, you change and do something different. So that's how the entry to the space in which this philosophy is spelled out. And you can see flow was the idea from the very beginning of how this space can be designed. And so the forest part of it is about quiet reading. It's about creative exploration. That's the first most important part of a child's day, if you think. They have to be given an opportunity to explore and learn about their environment. So here are all the sort of modalities that can happen in in the forest, everything from art and design, quiet reading, doing fine motor things with your hands to become good at those things. And interdisciplinary is a big thing as well. And then there's a mountain, which is, again, it's about inner peace, but active body, where you are able to build and play. Even the mathematics is active. There's mobile technology, there's physical movement, there's connection to nature, independent study. So all these things happen in the area we call mountain. And finally, in the area called ocean, it's about social and emotional development, where there are student presentations, group performance, dance, drama, connecting to the world outside, teacher collaboration, connecting to parents and community. So the idea is to create a different language, different vocabulary for schools than we are familiar with. So it doesn't matter, we use these more metaphors. When I talk to you about Timor-Leste, we use different metaphors. It doesn't matter. The idea is to get them thinking differently, that the school is not what we remember. It's not my grandfather's school, right? This is about the future. And I told you our children are going to have a different world in which they live. And we need to get them thinking and developing different kind of skills. So here was some of what we were imagining the space to be like. This was some of the old renderings, and this is the actual space. The actual always better than the design, because the minute children come in, it changes the environment. So here again, some of our imagining of the space and the actual spaces. Again, so this is, we wanted to create this forest metaphor. And of course, the real spaces always look a lot better. And if you look at the images and if you look at the children there, you actually see flow in action in the way that they are. And it's a very different feeling than seeing what happens in a typical classroom. It's a very different feeling because there's a natural flow. The spaces and the curriculum and the pedagogy are all working in harmony with each other, And as I said, this is like the example of the cave space, where children, even in a group, need to get away. They need to be by themselves. And these spaces provide those opportunities. But of course, these opportunities would only be possible if the teachers allowed it. And that's why I think that this is professional development, and getting the teachers to be excited about this new model is just as important. Now, the Timor-Leste Teachers College also is an important one. And as I said, this was done by the missionaries of Nazareth, but also with Esclavas de la Eucharistia, which is the global congregations. And so this was a privileged project for us. And the idea here was that Timor-Leste, I don't know how many of you know about it. It's one of the, I think maybe the newest country in the world, maybe 18 or 20 years old. And it is coming out of a war, and there is nothing there. I mean, the education and everything has been totally destroyed. And so just to start a school makes no sense because there are no teachers who are qualified to teach there. So the Sisters of Nazareth and Eucharistia, they said that we have to create a teachers college first so that the teachers can be trained, and then we can create a school alongside that so that they can practice in a real world environment. So the idea is to literally rebuild the whole education system from the ground up. It's a very, very ambitious project, a very ambitious idea. And of course, we are very honored to be a part of that. So they gave a name to the school called Dalam Ba, which means where to in Tetum. That's the local language. Actually, I think they speak 3 languages there: Tetum, Portuguese, and Indonesian, so Bahasa. So the idea was visioning the future. So we met again to have conversations about how to start something with nothing. We have to imagine the future in a place that has nothing, So we met with the whole group, the sisters from, I think some people came in from Portugal, some people came in from Timor-Leste, and all of us met in Colégio Montserrat. And we had many interesting workshops where we were visioning the future. And here are some images from that. And this is the site in Timor-Leste. It's a beautiful place. As I said, very poor, but some place that you can imagine rebuilding and starting from scratch and creating the future, which doesn't have to copy what is being done in the West. It can be something that is that celebrates all the things about the local culture as well. So the sisters and we had one of our representatives go there, and they really learned a lot about the site. And so essentially, one of the things we came up with was that the children have to have a life plan, not just a learning plan, because this is not just about their academic development. This is about their human development. So whereas in Collegi Montserrat, you have the support of these other social structures, here you don't have that. The school has a much bigger responsibility. So the idea was we have to think about creating a life plan for children and not just a learning plan. And so when we were talking about it, we began to realize what complicated job this is. These are the child at the center, but here are all the different things that are important to incorporate into the curriculum and incorporate into the design of the space and to design the philosophy. So this is how we began this process. So we created a master plan for the project, which included the primary school, kindergarten. It was a kindergarten through 12th grade and a teacher training academy, which is that number 1. And we started the design with these 2 buildings, the teacher training academy and the kindergarten. So I just want to share with you some of those. So you can see the kindergarten and teacher training college. And we, in this case, were inspired. Sister Monica and others told us, take inspiration from the ocean, the marine ecosystems of Timor-Leste. And so we started creating, you can see here, Turtle Bay, jellyfish circle, starfish, seahorse lagoons, seashell lagoon, and coral bay. So again, metaphors, just like you have the mountain and ocean metaphors, we have that here as well. And you can see the colors and the patterns that we took inspiration from. And the design, we wanted to create, again, a sense of flow in the spaces. And here are some of the images that we are anticipating how that space might look. So these are the different aspects of the kindergarten. And then for the teacher training college, we also wanted to take inspiration from local organic shapes, the local culture, the local architecture. And so we wanted to create that colors palette, also create a sense of flow in the teachers college. And here are some images from there. And of course, we wanted them to, the teachers, we wanted them to also do a lot of hands-on learning. It's not, again, as I said, it's learning by doing. So we didn't want the teachers to not have the opportunity to be not just learning theory, but also we want teachers to learn in the way that they're going to teach, so that they don't have to learn in a classroom and then suddenly they're going to a school where there are no classrooms. So we wanted the school for teachers to look exactly like a high school or a college for that's a modern 21st century space. So that's how the teachers college was designed. Now, I have to say that this project is in fundraising, and I'm hoping that this such an inspirational project can raise the money that is necessary to get it constructed and built. So here is some ideas of how we wanted the outdoor space. This is actually a teachers college that we designed in Israel, and we created a lot of opportunities for teachers to be outside as well. And we wanted, again, the beautiful environment in Timor-Leste to be very much part of that. So I want to conclude here by talking about 2 different ways of educating, right? One way of educating is called educating like a carpenter. Now, if you're a carpenter, if you do everything right, if you get the right materials, if you take the right measurements, you can build something perfect, absolutely perfect. So this is something that carpenters are used to. But the important thing is that we cannot educate like a carpenter when we are talking about children, because children are not parts the way that the carpenter's parts are. So what happens, unfortunately, is in the most of the world, education looks like we are carpenters. We think that if we do our job properly, then the children are going to be fine. Because, hey, we did our job, right? I cut it properly. I gave the right lesson. Gave the right instructions. Everything should be fine. But this is not how it works. In education, we have to think like a gardener. We have to think like a gardener because there is an interaction between the plant and the environment. So every plant is different. Even it might be planting at the same time, we have to nurture each plant differently because there's no guarantee that any plant will grow properly unless the gardener understands what that particular plant's needs are. So we have to start thinking about education like a gardener and not like a carpenter. We have no guarantee of success when you are a gardener. We can do our best, but the ultimate success comes in whether or not the plant is able to take that nourishment and grow. Now, the other important thing to understand is that children are not like adults, right? If you think about the nature, if you take good care of a plant when it is small and you give the nutrition, you give the love, you give all of the help that you need, when it becomes a tree, it doesn't need any help. It doesn't need watering, it doesn't need anything because it's strong. It has been taken care of as a plant. It's the same thing with people. If you take good care of them as children, then they will grow up to be strong adults. We don't treat children like adults. Many parents say, look, I want my children to be tough. I don't want you to be soft on them because, I want them to grow up to be strong. No, it's the opposite. If you take good care of a child when they're young, if you give them all the love and attention and nurturing, then they will naturally grow up to be strong, capable adults and good citizens. So that's the moral of the story. And I think the good thing is that in both Collegi Montserrat and the Timor-Leste project, that I have the good fortune of working with this amazing group of sisters. I think this is what they are all about. They are true gardeners when it comes to educating the child. So with that, I'm going to stop maybe a few minutes early, but I'm sure nobody's going to mind that. So it was my honor to do this presentation.
Thank you very much. It's been impressive, really inspiring. I really loved when you talked about dreams, how beautiful. But I think it's even much more beautiful being able to implement altogether those dreams, make those dreams come true. So congratulations, really, for what you're achieving. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gracias.
Let me remind you all, where we can buy the book, because it's important as well, because surely you're really eager. Flow, Emerging Learning, there's a www.nazarethglobaleducation, in English, education, okay, .org, nazarethglobaleducation.org, and you can buy it through the web. In Spain, it's available at the Col·legi Montserrat in Barcelona. In America, you may send a mail, capacitar@hacerlazos.org.ar. Okay, so capacitar@hacerlazos.ar. And to wind up, I'd like to ask you to say a motivating utterance to close this super flow. I think me saying, really, I've been infected, so to speak, by this passion. And I don't know, Nuria, would you like to start with your motivational utterance? Well, or me, and Nuria, if you allow me, well, being here together and being given support by so many people who love us, even though it's virtually through the screen, you feel the warmth, and that's wonderful. In this world, which is so uncertain sometimes, so volatile, with so much pain and suffering for many, we need people which bring us hope, who generate hope, and we need to believe in the human being. This flow space, and especially the example of Timor-Leste as well, is believing in the child, knowing that we can make headway, we can move forwards and bring about a much better world than the one we have. Let's not kind of refrain from doing good. Well, thanks, Montserrat Nuria. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you all, you, Christina, for moderating this presentation. You have your roots in our schools, as you know. And Prakash, Mr. Prakash Nai, thank you very much. Montserrat, thank you very much for being together with us in this book presentation, but also thanks to all of you, so many friends, the family, kind of sisters who are here with us from so many places in the world, so diverse, but where we are sharing so many things. We have so many things in common and so many things to tell each other. So thank you very much. I'd really love to greet you all one by one, but well, there are so many people that I learn from, really, and I'm so glad that you are all here. I feel really pleased, and even though your microphone is muted and you are not speaking, but we have a non-verbal language. Your presence is felt, and that's very important. Has been very important for us today. And my message, my utterance, well, I'd say live in experiencing depth this passion for education. Your task, your attraction for education, experience it in depth, be audacious, take decisions, take risks, because in this way we'll be able to tell other people, and you'll never alone. We will do everything together, and I hope we can continue seeing each other. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. We haven't finished yet, just a few minutes, because as we said, we made it clear that it's not just words in this life which matter. There's a video for you now.
¿Qué es el flow?
What's flow?
¿Es un espacio o una
Is it a
nueva
space?
metodología?
Or a new methodology?
¿Puede existir una cosa sin la otra?
Could one thing exist without the other?
¿Cuáles son sus fundamentos teóricos?
Which are its theoretical foundations?
¿De dónde surgió la inspiración para crear?
Where the inspiration came from in order to create?
¿Cómo es la vida en el flow?
What's life like in flow?
Descubre todas las respuestas en el libro
Discover all
Flow,
the answers in the
Aprendizaje Emergente.
Flow, Emerging Learning.
El flow, un nuevo entorno de
Flow,
aprendizaje que
a
rompe
new
los esquemas
learning
tradicionales de la
environment
educación
which
en
breaks
serie
away with the
para
traditional
potenciar las
schemes of
múltiples
serial education
inteligencias
to promote
individuales.
the multiple individual
Un
intelligences.
diseño innovador del espacio
An
escolar que
innovative
lo
design
transforma en
of school
ecosistemas
space which
donde maestros
transforms
y
it
niños de
into
edades diversas
ecosystems where
fluyen
teachers and
hasta
children of different
fusionarse
ages
en una
flow
auténtica
until they become
comunidad de
merged
aprendizaje.
in a real authentic community of learning. Well, so this is it. Thank you very much to all. It's been a pleasure. For me, I've been really proud to be here together with all of you, because as Nuria, you were saying, I'm a former student of the schools of Nazareth missionaries. I hadn't seen the flow space, but this wish to meet each other, to develop our own skills. Well, I thank you for what I learned then so much and for giving me this wonderful opportunity today to meet each other again. So thank you very much, really. And to everybody, all of you being here with us, a happy day and then disseminate flow. Thank you very much.